Hello everyone and welcome to the studio. If you're new here, then hello, my name is Megan and today I'm going to be reviewing this MEEDEN 42 watercolor set. I purchased mine off of Amazon. I wasn't asked to make the video, I wasn't sent anything by this company, I'm not sponsored by this company. I was just actually really interested in this particular set because it is a fan palette, as you'll see in a minute. So on the box there's no information about these paints at all. Really, there's no information at all even on the set, but this is all that you get, including some water brushes, which I'll get into in a minute. So you get 42 watercolor paints. You also get a sponge on the top, as you see there, to wipe your brushes off, and then the paints and the color chart here. The color chart doesn't make sense to me, and the color order honestly doesn't make sense to me either, but anyway. The palette folds out like a fan, as you see here. The yellow, the first row, that's as far as it goes. It doesn't go all the way around. I made the mistake of closing mine while it was still wet, and so mine look a little nasty, but I will get into that in a minute. Here are some color swatches. This paper right here that I'm showing you is actually a really cheap Hobby Lobby brand of watercolor paper that my mom had purchased for me. And so this is a cheap cellulose paper, which is really common with beginners. Honestly, the paints are nice and vibrant, and they don't seem chalky. There is probably one color in particular that had a little bit of a granulation, but it's more like the chalk from the filler or the type of pigment that they use. Sometimes brands can use cheaper pigments that end up looking a little bit chalky. This right here is on the Canson XL mixed media paper, which is really common and easy to find for beginner artists. As you can see, there's really not that much of a difference between the two papers. On this one though, I do have a black line to show opacity of some of these colors. As you can see, there are some that are a little bit more opaque than others. Maybe because of the type of pigment that it is, and it may be because there's white added into the color. I really don't know because, like I said before, there's no information regarding these paints. Also, I don't want to bash the company and say that they're using cheap pigments. I just truly don't know what they're using. And plus, this is a pretty affordable set I found on Amazon. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's not an affiliated link or anything, but if you are interested in these paints, you can go and check it out. The last kind of paper that I want to show you how this looks on would be this toned gray mixed media paper by Strathmore. And I decided to swatch this out in here because I want to use these in the sketchbook more often. And this also can show you how the opacity looks compared to being on white paper. And they show up really well, and I'm actually kind of glad that it does. I didn't want a watercolor in my sketchbook that was too opaque, too transparent, like you see commonly with more of the artist grade types of paints. Now there are artist grade paints out there that are opaque. I'm not going to say that that's a good or a bad thing. It's honestly up to preference. And here are some mixing things that I got done. It seemed to mix okay. It's not the best, but I mean, you have 42 colors to pick from, and usually when you have more colors in a student grade set, it's not meant to be mixed. As I've said earlier, I've done 3 pieces of art with this specific paint. I've done this iris flower, a lunar moth, and also a lotus flower. I'll show you each of them up close so you can get a feel of what the paint looks like when applied in a painting. The first one I'll talk about is this iris flower. I painted this one on Arches cold pressed 100% cotton watercolor paper, and also used some Prismacolor pencils on top of the watercolor to give it some details, so that's why it looks a little bit more grainy than probably what you would be expecting. The next painting that I'll show you is my Luna Moth that I painted, and this one is completely done in this MEEDEN watercolor paint, but there is a little bit of that Mia Hemi Jelly Gouache set added just for some of the details and to get that white to stand out. This paper right here is not a cotton paper. This is most likely a wood pulp paper or a cellulose. This is the Master's Touch version, or the Hobby Lobby brand, again, that my mom had purchased for me. The next one is the lotus flower, again, the same paper as the Luna Moth. And up close you can see how well these blended. I did use a little bit of the Mia Hemi Jelly Gouache set again for mostly the middle area where the yellow parts of the flower are, where you see the pollen, and a little bit of white around some of the edges. The longer I've used this paint and the more I've used it, I've noticed that it's began to crack. Even my white paint here has actually come off, and I'm able to actually show you how thin these paints are because of that, so that's a good thing, and how warped it's gotten. They're quite thin paints, but I mean, I've used these quite a bit, and they've lasted a while. I haven't hit pan really on any of them. You can see that the yellow one has cracked in the middle, and I think that was mainly my fault because I keep wanting to close these whenever they're still wet. I need to leave them open to dry, and that just, I don't know. I think I'm just too impatient with it. So if you have that problem, you probably won't like that. I'll show you what the pans look like when you close them when they're wet. As you can see, these top two are pretty bad about it. They've been like smudged. They look kind of gross. And also on the backs of these, I'll show you how the paints from the palette behind it have smudged onto the back. So if that's going to bother you, I wouldn't recommend getting these paints. Honestly, this is a bit frustrating for me. Even the palettes that hold the paint have warped, and I don't know, I feel like that is my fault for letting it not dry completely and then just closing it. It even says on the back here to leave it open to dry, but then again, I am just very impatient. With this set, you are also given 4 water brushes in total. You're given 3 in a separate little area, and you're given 1 with the palette itself. So this is the one that came with the palette. I actually liked it. I used this one whenever I painted the lotus flower that I just showed you. And here I'm comparing it to my Pentel Aqua brush pen. So, I mean, that's a pretty common one. So if you have one of those, you can kind of judge how long this one would be. This one does seem to be longer, but yet thinner than the Pentel. So I'm guessing it holds roughly the same amount of water, if not probably a little bit more. So this is the other little container that you would get with this, and it gives you a few extra brushes. I haven't really used these. I used this one that I'm holding for a little bit of swatching. But the other 2 I haven't used because honestly they're just a little bit too big for my liking, and the bristles aren't exactly straight. I don't know if that's how they're supposed to be. I wouldn't think so. You'll see it better on this one right here. It has almost a very feathered look, and I don't think that's really how they're supposed to come, but I don't know. I'm not the company. So that's pretty much all that I have to say on this set. I like it. I think it's fine for beginners. If you're going to have an issue with having to let it stay open to dry, then I would recommend not getting it. But if that's not going to be a problem for you and you're just starting out and you want to get into using watercolor, I would recommend it. Again, I have a link for these down in my down in the description box. It's not affiliated. It's just if you happen to be interested. Also, I should be getting some MEEDEN acrylic paint soon that I just purchased, so I'll also be making a review on that. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and remember, stay creative and be kind.